Welcome to week 6. This week we're going to look at a couple more terms that you can really start thinking about whenever you're creating any piece of work. And we're going to look further at different font choices and what they mean. So, you're already watching the video. We have legibility and readability. Now, there are a lot of typography terms that can kind of get confusing, or you may think multiple words mean the same thing. These are one of those kind of sets. Legibility is the ease at which a reader can recognize and differentiate between letter forms. Okay, so the ease at which a reader can recognize and differentiate between letter forms. So, does everything run together? Can they actually understand what they're looking at? Then readability is how easily a page of text can be read and navigated. So legibility affects readability. So legibility, think more of the letter forms. Readability, think about a page of text. Okay, so I have these two sites for you. Legibility of a typeface is a product of its design and relates to the ability to distinguish one glyph from another when reading. So then we're actually going to get into vocabulary that you guys already know, and these are things that affect the legibility of each font, so kind of each letter. But we can see this one is easier to distinguish each letter than this one. Text blocks are both set in 18 point, but the one on the right is more legible due to its taller X height than the left. This one is more narrow, so the letters kind of become close. It's almost that they look squashed. And again, this isn't like, oh, I have no idea what that says. We're just trying to ease the letter forms for our readers. So there are a bunch of examples here that you can kind of look through. Readability is related to how the type is arranged or typeset and is therefore controlled by the designers. So factors affecting this would be our type size, type case. There are a lot of fonts that are being designed now that are all only uppercase letters. It's not even the forced caps where your secondary letters are shorter. They have a smaller X height, but pay attention to that because sometimes you may find that you're like, oh, I love this font, it's great, and then you realize everything is shouting because they're all uppercase letters. Leading, our space between lines. It's kind of, when you read a book or when you read a sentence, you know how that period gives us that second to breathe, right? When you're learning about where to put periods, it's, tight line spacing impacts readability negatively. We took a pause here because of the space. Well, it's kind of the same when we determine how much space should be between our lines, how much leading we need. It's giving each word a little bit of space. Sorry about that. So we're giving space between those lines so we can breathe. We can read it at our own pace. Color or contrast. Overlapping things with text becomes very difficult right away, as many of you may have already noticed. If you have an image and you try to put text over it, a lot of times we have to use a middle layer, maybe a lower opacity version, but something to separate it. Color can do the same thing. If we look over here, this starts to vibrate. If you're looking at it, you can kind of see, if you kind of zone out a little bit, the red behind the purple starts to kind of blur behind the words and it gives this vibration. So you want to make sure, especially if you're working on the web, that you pay very close attention to your colors. Okay? And then this talks more about web typography. We will get into the difference between print and web a little later in the term, but I wanted you to take a look at this and see how it's a little bit different, still pretty much the same though for print versus web. A couple more vocab words that I want you guys to be aware of. So a typeface, I believe we went over this earlier, but just to remind you, A typeface is a collection of letter forms designed to go together. This can be a few letters for a logo, all the way through a full alphabet, letters, numbers, special characters. So when I had you guys design the 3 letters that were your initials, you created a typeface. You know, I could say that that was the Jen Fuller typeface, even though I only made a J and an F. If it's a font, it is the collection of all of the characters of a specific typeface that is necessary for a typesetting. Okay, so it's that whole version of it, all of them belong together and fit together. Here we go. So, well, I guess I could have just left the lore maps in, but I'll do it this way. If we go into Window and Type, Character. So we have our font right here. The font family is the collection that includes all of the type styles. So what's a type style? These are all type styles. The bold, the italic, the condensed, the heavy, let's see if Bodoni. So book, bold, all of those are type styles. And a font family means we're going to get the Bodoni and then all of the styles that come with it. So a font would just be, Helvetica, regular Helvetica. Then the font family includes all of these type styles that go along with it. Okay? So now when you're critiquing one another, or if we're talking about things, you can say, I think maybe you should try a different type style. This seems very heavy. Look to see if there is a light version. Now again, depending on the designer, depending on the history, blah, 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 we might not have all of those type styles. It may just be the one. Or depending upon if you got it on, a downloaded free, copyright-free site, it may just be a typeface. They may not have all of uppercase, all of lowercase. They may just have one specific version. Okay? So, things that can affect legibility and readability. Even though we kind of already talked about this, I want to re-emphasize because it's really important. Some of us find typefaces that we think look awesome and they fit our theme. Maybe I'm doing a real grunge poster, something like that. Yes, you may find the perfect fitting typeface, but you need to make sure that it's readable and that it's legible. You will lose more clients, more of an audience if we can't read it. We're in a day and age where people move really quickly, right? If your internet is down for, 2 seconds, we're like, this is it. Restart the router. I can't believe it. I'm going to call, Comcast or whatever and get it fixed. We are a little bit, unfortunately, we don't take the time. So if your poster's up on the wall and I can't clearly tell what's going on, I'm just going to move on. So with legibility, the style of the typeface can make a difference. Familiarity, sometimes if we are used to seeing a certain font choice, we know exactly what it says. Helvetica is really all around us. I'm not saying that you always need to use it, but it is something that we are used to looking at. Serif versus sans serif. Go back to good old Baskerville. Depending on what you're using, the stroke weight, the width of the typeface, size and shape. Again, we're kind of looking to distinguish between the letters. Then with our readability is when we get into alignment more. So we're kind of going to go over to the paragraph tab here, and depending on how you want to align it, of course, with just this line, we won't really be able to see a difference. But if you have things that are weirdly aligned or kind of blending into the edges or butting right up against something else, then we can run into some issues. Okay, generally, let me select this whole thing here. Generally, left aligned is going to be the easiest to read in the United States. We are used to reading left to right and top to bottom, so this clearly tells us exactly where we need to start. A lot of times people use center alignment to, depending upon what their design is. It's very nice to have this strong center line. You can right justify things. Again, we're looking at the readability, so it'll depend on what your design is to see, but we're still creating a nice sharp line here. We still know how to read, it's just a little bit different. Okay, couple other things that affect readability. I want to bring in some more vocab. Rags, widows, orphans, and hyphens. I will go into these in a second, but the rag here is this edge. I'm going to start with it actually justified this way so it's easier for us to see. It's where each line of text stops and the shape that that makes. So this is really kind of strange, right? Because I go out, in, way out, big space. We want to make this so that if you squint, a lot of times with typography I squint. See the shapes you're making and see the contrast between the black lettering and the negative white space. Let me show you, actually, this is a good example. All right, so widows. Widows are a word or line of text at the top of a column. So it's kind of rare to have one word, but sometimes there is one word, or sometimes it's just one line and then you have an empty space. So, let's say you're writing a book or a newspaper or something, and you have your paragraph and this last line just gets stuck all by itself. If we squint, it looks very out of place. We're drawn to this instead of wanting to read here. It doesn't. All of these things draw our attention to something that we don't want them to. Orphans are the same thing, but at the bottom. So at the bottom of the paragraph, if you have one or two words, small words left alone, or if you have the first line of a paragraph alone at the bottom of the page. Very commonly, especially with like in school, you guys will just have one word at the end of a paragraph all by itself. That is an orphan. And again, I'll tell you how to fix these things, but these things draw attention negatively to certain parts of your typography. Rivers. Rivers are the gaps or white space that you see in columns of text. So if you squint, again, we can actually see there's one flowing here as well. Sometimes if we have too big of spacing and if your words just happen to line up where you can get this long line of white space, it draws attention to the negative space instead of us wanting to read the text. And rags, what I talked about earlier, the imbalance alignment of text. So if you're left justifying, it'll be on the right justifying, it'll be on the left. This is going to go over how to fix some of these. So if you want to take a look, but I'll show you over here. So, no, that's not what I want. So let's say I have something like this. You're just going to want to rearrange your letters and your words. Now, unfortunately, I made all of these very long words. Let me just split them up so that we actually see some spaces, like so. All right, so let's say this is what I'm working with. Well, I can tell that this part of the rag, it's way too large. We have, way more over here and over here, so I need to adjust this. So what I can do is start, wherever I visually think is going to work best, enter that word down, and start adjusting. Now that looks pretty good, except you know what, let's try to bump this down. And again, depending upon what your background, your design is, but now this is starting to look smoother. All right, I'm going to bring this up. You would decide, but let's see if I do something like this. All right, so now I've omitted the orphan at the bottom, and I've kind of cleaned up my rag. You don't necessarily, it's not going to ever become perfect. That's not the point of this. It's just thinking about it as a design and how it works best. Now, another thing that I saw a lot of were hyphens. So, you've hit the edge of your space, and we had a couple of hyphens here for your words. Now, if you squint at this, the hyphens are different because they allow negative space on top and below. So again, we're drawn to this. So if you just go into paragraph here and check on hyphenate, it will remove them. Now, I put these in, there's a space after the letters, so it didn't do anything. But well, you get it. If you copy and paste in a group of text, just check hyphenate. Remove those. Now, if you have a hyphen, that's where we play into just bringing the whole word down and adjusting your spacing to fit. Okay? So, widows, orphans, thinking about alignment, rags, and hyphens. Okay? One other thing I just wanted to discuss, if you are using a font that you've downloaded and you want to save out your AI file, your InDesign document, you need to save it as a PDF to get your typography to stick with it. If I have this, I believe this was, let's see. So this was a downloaded one, not part of Illustrator. If I were to send you my AI file, you would get an error with this, and your Illustrator would try to put in whatever it thought was the closest font that you had to it. So when we save out a PDF, we're saving it with the font that we chose. Okay? If you needed someone to see your Illustrator file and you wanted them to be able to see your font, you need to do what's called packaging. So if we go to File, Package, it'll create a folder. I named this file Test just for the sake of things, so it's calling it Test Folder, but it'll copy the links. So if you had any imagery that you brought in and you were just referencing the images, your fonts, and then it creates a report. So we can do package, make sure you're following copyright law, and then we can see in this folder, I have my AI file, the report saying this was the name of the document, the color mode, all of that, and then it actually includes your fonts so that whoever you send this to will be able to open it. Okay, so a lot of times when you're dealing with a client, you may need to do that. Sometimes they want to be able to see all the layers. Granted, we can now open a PDF in Illustrator to see some stuff, but there are some specific instances where you may want to send the Illustrator file, and then again, you'll just need to package it. Okay? So, assignments. Oh, and I have this Illustrator. If you just go to helpx.adobe.com, you can find Illustrator and it's step-by-step on how to package, so if you forget. All right, so due Wednesday, we have a shorter poem or the chorus of a song that has meaning to you. Okay, obviously you want to put the name of the poem or song, the artist, creator, and writer, and then that, couple lines of the song. Take a look at different font choices and highlight specific words. So have a base font that you use on the whole piece, and then draw importance to specific words with your font choices. Think about placement on the page, scale, color as well. So, was Valentine's Day recently, so let's say, whatever, we have this, okay? I could pick my base font. Maybe I just want to keep it kind of simple. I'm going to go with actually a Bodoni. This is, you know, my love song, so I want to have something that kind of fits. And you'll be working on an 8.5 by 11 piece. But so let's say this is the song lyric. You can figure out how you want the lines to work. Think about all the things that we've talked about. Readability, legibility, all of our new vocab words as you go through doing this. But then maybe I want, you know, you could be cliche, love could be red, or maybe love is a different choice typeface. So play around with all of these things. Maybe love is all in caps, but find certain words that you think sum up the poem or the song to bring more attention to those specific words. Still paying attention again to hyphens, orphans, widows, all of that. Okay, so you will only really use typography for this, and then figure out how you want it displayed on the page. That one is due Wednesday. I've gotten the feeling that a lot of people aren't really watching these videos, so if you are, thank you for watching and you know, paying attention to all of this. If you just write in the comments of your poem assignment, if you write in the comments that you watched this video, I will give you a bonus point to one of your assignments that maybe you've missed a point on. Okay, so as a thank you for watching these videos, I will give you 1 extra point. Just put in the comments of the poem assignment, I watched the video. Okay? And then due Sunday is the SXU typography show. So let's say you guys as a class putting on a typography show, you're going to create a postcard for the SXU typography show. Okay? You want your design to focus on typography, but you can use further elements in support of the type. You must include SXU typography show, the date, the time, and the location. Think about anything else that you would want to use to draw on your audience. This should be an ad for your fellow St. Xavier students. So how can you target them? Now, you might want to put in a paragraph of text that says, what is typography? You may want to include directions from a local area. Think about postcards that you've seen and what typography they have on them, and think about, again, what graphical elements you'll want to use. This is the base text that you can use, but I would recommend that you add more information than this. Think about your font choices and everything that we've talked about so far. This will be a 5.5 by 8.5 inch PDF. It can be portrait or landscape. Make sure you're working in CMYK because ultimately this would be a printed piece. Due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. All right, so take a look at all these definitions, think about it. You know, a lot of times with both of these assignments, I would open up an Illustrator document that had multiple artboards and create your design however you want it. And then in each artboard, try different font choices and see what you think works well. It's really helpful to have everything laid out where you can kind of see and mix and match and copy and paste. All right, so let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you have a wonderful week.